Blake Shook, and I've gone from 2 hives to over 30,000 hives. And in these videos, my goal is to take all the practical tips I've learned and apply them to you no matter your scale of beekeeping. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about comb honey. Now, there's all different ways to make comb honey. You can do Ross round honey supers, you can do supers of cut comb honey, and in my opinion, they're all super annoying. It is tough to make comb honey because you're getting bees to draw out a ton of comb every year. Not only that, they're having to draw out this really flimsy pure beeswax foundation, and that's a lot tougher to handle than plastic foundation. So it's really tough to deal with. It's really delicate, and it's tough to get the bees to draw it out right. And then if they don't cap it all perfectly, it doesn't look very good. You have to have a super strong hive and a great honey flow. So there's just a lot of complicating things about producing comb honey. But what I want to show you today is my favorite method of just producing a few frames worth of comb honey. So if you're not trying to produce several supers full and you just want to make some to give to your friends and family, or to try in your own house, there's a lot simpler way to make a few frames of comb honey than just trying to do a whole box full of it. So what I do, you want to use shallow frames in general. So this is a shallow frame. It makes a better comb honey. Usually if you go with a medium or a deep frame, it's a lot more fragile and it'll often fall out of the frame because that weight is so heavy and the foundation is so fragile. So I get shallow frames, and it's okay if they go into a medium box. I'll show you that in just a second. So what I do is I just get a shallow frame. You get the pure beeswax foundation. You don't want any wires in it, and you can't use plastic foundation because if you use plastic, you're not going to be able to cut up that honeycomb. And then I flip the frame over, and I'm going to insert it in the top groove like this. So I've got it just resting in this top groove. And then you can buy all sorts of fancy implements to try to drip melted beeswax in that groove to secure it in place. You can buy frames that have a wedge on the top bar that you can snap off, insert that comb in and nail back on. That's a lot of trouble if you're just trying to make a few frames. So I've got this piece of wax that I pulled out of one of my hives. They drew out some wax wrong. So I've just got this little piece of wax, and I'm just gonna take a few pieces of it and crumple it up, and I'm just gonna stick it in little balls on either side of this foundation and just kind of use that wax to glue in this piece of foundation. And so it's super quick, super simple. I'm just using these little bits of wax. I know it's super unorthodox, super unprofessional, but it's super cheap. And if you're just trying to make a few frames of cut comb honey, you don't need to go buy a bunch of fancy gear. Really, all you need is a couple shallow frames, and then you've got to have that pure beeswax foundation. That's critical, and that's really all you have to buy. You can do this with a medium frame. Again, you've got to be really careful with it because when it's full of honey, it's so easy for it to fall out and get damaged. So usually I prefer shallow frames to medium frames. But if you go this route, you're really only spending a couple of dollars to produce an entire frame of cut comb honey rather than, buying it at the store for a fortune, because cut comb honey sells for a lot of money. Now, once this has been in the hive, the bees are going to really glue this all together so that it won't be quite so fragile. But you can see now it's hanging down just like I want it to. You can see I've got these little pieces of wax stuck on top to hold it in place. It's hanging down nice and neat. Those little pieces of wax are, again, holding this all together, and it's hanging down just like I want it. And now let's take it out to the bees and put it on a beehive. Now I've got my 2 frames with our plastic, let me start over. Okay, so I've got our 2 frames with the pure beeswax foundation ready to go into the hive. Now it's super hot out here today. Well, super hot. It's in the mid 90s. So a nice, you know, moderate day in Texas. But it's hot enough that out in this sunlight, this foundation is going to melt pretty quick. So I need to keep it in the shade. So I'm going to set it down over here in the shade. Now, you do want to install it the same day, install it in a hive the same day you put it in the frames. If any dust gets on the foundation, the bees aren't going to draw it out. Now, I want that foundation kind of in the heart of the hive, surrounded by frames that the bees are already filling with honey. So I've got two medium supers on this hive. They've already got the top one pretty much completely full of honey. Well, they've actually got both boxes pretty much full of honey. I want that foundation in my bottom super because it's closer to the brood nest and the bees are more likely to draw it out quickly. So I'm just going to take my top super off. I'm going to pull one of my frames of honey out. So I've got a frame with a lot of honey on it in the bottom. And I'm going to insert one of these frames, make sure it's nice and straight, right in between the other frames that are already in place. And then I'm going to skip over a couple frames and I'm going to do it again. So remove the frame of honey. I don't want these two frames of comb honey foundation right next to each other. I want them in between frames that are already drawn out and that the bees have already filled. So I'm going to push those tightly together. These two frames of honey, I'll put them in some other hives just to get rid of them, or you can extract them. And then I'm going to come back and in about a week, I would expect them to have pretty much drawn out those frames. And within a couple weeks, they should have them filled up and you should have some beautiful comb honey that you can slice up and do whatever you do with comb honey. You can put it on a charcuterie board, you can put it in a jar of honey and sell it like chunk comb honey, give it away from friends, to friends. The options are pretty much limitless. So pretty cool way to make just a couple frames of cut comb honey. If this video is helpful, then please like and subscribe, and we'd really appreciate it.